Hi, I'm Kellie Huck. I'm on the Advisory Council of the ITER Institute. I'm a former U.S. trade negotiator and diplomat, served and worked all over Latin America. The U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement is the free trade agreement between the United States, Canada, and Mexico. It is a renewed version of the original NAFTA, North America Free Trade Agreement, which entered into force January 1st, 1994. This is a critically important agreement for the United States. It represents over 506 million consumers, over 42 trillion, that's trillion with a T, in GDP, which is about a third of global GDP. So it's a very, very important agreement. And when we first came together originally in the mid-90s, part of the idea of the agreement was that we would be able to better compete by uniting our supply chains with Canada and Mexico against some of our upstart trading competitors, including in Southeast Asia and beyond. The USMCA is incredibly significant for Nebraska. Since the original conception of NAFTA in 1994, agricultural exports of the United States overall have more than quadrupled. And for Nebraska, our #1 export destination is Mexico, critically important for corn. #2 is Canada. So we really rely on the market access barriers being reduced through this agreement to allow for better market access for our farmers and ranchers here in Nebraska. The three governments are undertaking a formal review of USMCA right now because it's foreseen in the agreement. There were many innovations that were brought into place with the USMCA. One of those innovations was that we would review the agreement at regular intervals. That is why the governments right now are reviewing the agreement, is to prepare for a sunset clause that comes into place in 2036, which is 16 years after the original conception of the agreement in 2020. What is very important as we go through this review is that we appreciate that this integration between our economies has really served to allow our farmers and ranchers to have more export destinations here in the Northern Hemisphere, as well as for us to better compete with China and other competitors that we have in the global trade realm. There's a public comment period that's going on right now here in the United States, in Mexico, and in Canada. We'll have stakeholders from all different walks of life saying how the agreement has worked for them, where they think it can be improved. And here in the United States, we're going to be having a formal public hearing on November 17th. So that'll be something to watch. This review is unfolding upon the backdrop of enhanced tariff activity by the Trump administration. We saw very early in the Trump administration tariffs be applied on both Mexico and Canada, due at least ostensibly to fentanyl trade. We also have seen very active national security investigations by the Trump administration under Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962. What this means is that we already are seeing Mexico and Canada suffering with the application of tariffs by the United States, which technically violate the USMCA. So that means that we're entering into these discussions with, I think it's fair to say, some fairly significant trade tensions lurking in the background. I think what's most important that we get right in this review is to be sure that we maintain market access for U.S. exports. Very important to the state of Nebraska for our farmers and ranchers. It's also very important that we make sure that we maintain access to the inputs to U.S. production. I like to talk about inputs, not imports. We need to think about where our imports are inputs to U.S. factories, U.S. farmers, U.S. service providers. And what we have found is that our economies in North America are so integrated is that a lot of those inputs are coming from Canada, a lot of those inputs are coming from Mexico. Car parts are the ones people always think about. Energy is critically important. So this is something that we really have to get right to be sure that those export markets are preserved and to be sure that we get the inputs that we need for U.S. production through the imports we get through USMCA.